Please, order, please, for the deputy.
Tanaiste, in recent days, in press reports arising from briefings by the Minister for Social Protection and senior officials in her department, there is the pointing to the beginning of a campaign of pressure and harassment of unemployed people. Apparently, the Minister is to unveil a programme next week called Pathways to Work. One briefing in regard to that says that every unemployed person in the state will be given a date by which they are expected to be off the register of unemployed. And this process is referred to in a rather sinister turn of term, prediction of exit date, something you might associate more with the sentencing in a capital trial rather than how people in difficult circumstances should be treated. And if they are not off the register by that date, they will face what is referred to as a challenging interview. Apparently, senior officials in the Department of Social Protection are referring to this among themselves as Operation Transformation, referring to an RTE project where people who believe themselves to be seriously obese or overweight undertake a stringent programme to overcome that. And we are told in the same briefings that the Minister's drive will include the unemployed being called to Alcoholics Anonymous-style motivation meetings if they haven't met their exit date. Now, Tanaiste, criminal profiteering and greed by a tiny minority in this state caused the catastrophic collapse of economic activity in the last 3.5 years. Hundreds of thousands of our people, innocent people, lost their jobs. The disastrous austerity policy of your predecessors and your government have kept hundreds of thousands on the dole, unfortunately.
Your question, please, Deputy.
Is it now the case that they are to be regarded as having a serious dependency disease of which they have to be cured? And that the cure is to humiliate and harass them and make it intolerable for them to come and to get their weekly support? Is this how far the Irish Labour Party has fallen in less than 1 year, where before the last election you were to be the champions of the jobless? You brought out extensive documents on it. You were to be the powerhouse of job creation. Now your minister is planning institutionalised victimisation of the very victims of this crisis, revealed in the same week, incidentally, as you reward the perpetrators with €1.25 billion to the speculating bondholders, resources, precious resources that should be indeed going in
Deputy,
to create emergency programmes of work for the victims of unemployment. Now, we are told that the Troika is pushing this, and that follows. The idea of an army of unemployed people in the peripheral countries of Europe competing with each other to be forced into dreadful paying jobs and to drive down wages and conditions, that indeed is part of the programme
Deputy
Higgins,
I have to call the
Troika.
Now.
But
Deputy,
that is
please.
the pitiless strategy of capitalism. Can you explain why the Irish Labour Party, founded by the great champions of the victims, Connolly and Larkin and others, are now going to participate in this victimisation, in this classic Tory ploy of blaming the unemployed, blaming the victims of the crisis?
Well, Deputy Higgins has a great penchant for hyperbole, but I have to say that he has excelled even his most outrageous excesses this morning. That he can describe in such lurid terms a government publication that has not yet been published. You might at least wait. You might at least wait. You might at least wait and read it. Firstly, Deputy Higgins, You're right in one thing. The government does want to get people off the live register. We want to get people back to work. And that is why we have put forward a range of measures. That's why, for example, this week at the European Summit, we will be proposing a range of measures to provide for jobs and growth, to get the European economy to grow, to get the Irish economy to grow. And that's why we're taking the steps that we're taking to bring confidence back into our own economy, to get investment here and to get people back into employment. People who are out of work, Deputy Higgins, the approach of the government is to assist those people with training, with education, with job experience where it's appropriate, with internships where it's appropriate, in order that they can work themselves back into employment as the jobs become available. This government has no intention of allowing people to languish on unemployment payments and not take active measures in order to help them back into employment and to improve their skills. The OECD, in fact, has criticised the performance of previous governments in this respect, and that is why Minister Burton, with whom Deputy Higgins seems to have an absolute fascination, I presume it's because you share a constituency with her, that is why Minister Burton is leading an approach which is about reforming our social welfare system, so that it's not about leaving people in long-term unemployment, but that it is about enabling them to get back into employment as quickly as possible. Those proposals and those reforms will be contained in a strategy which she will be publishing shortly, called Pathways to Work. It will include a range of activation measures that will help people re-equip themselves for the workforce, retrain where it's appropriate. And when you talk about interviews with them, it is because people do have individual needs. People who are unemployed are not statistics. We're not talking about percentages. We're talking about people. And individual people have different needs depending on where they previously worked, depending on their level of education and experience. And what Minister Burton is putting in place is a new regime whereby individual people who are out of work will be talked with individually, their needs established, their requirements, their own wishes, and help provided for them using our state system, using the training and education system and labour activation systems to enable them to improve themselves while they are out of work. And that strategy will go side by side with the strategy that government is pursuing in order to get investment into the country, get jobs created, and get the number of people and the individuals who are on the live register off the live register, yes, Deputy Higgins, as quickly as possible and back into gainful employment.
1 minute, Deputy. A supplementary question.
There is one cure for mass unemployment, Tanaiste. That is job creation. And even before that, stop destroying, with your austerity policies, tens of thousands of jobs in the domestic economy. That is why we have 200,000 more people, unfortunately, on the live register now than we had 3.5 years ago. So the creation of real jobs with decent wages, that is the answer to unemployment. But these so-called labour activation measures are an excuse for the non-creation of jobs that your government has been guilty of over the past year or so. Now, unfortunately, the relentless loss of jobs is going to continue in the domestic economy as a result of your policies. In a reply to my colleague, Deputy Daly, the Minister of Social Protection said that this year it's expected that 45,200 more net redundancies, unfortunately, will occur in this state. And in 2013, 40,000. And incredibly, her department is making money available to CE schemes to provide for redundancy of CE workers.
You're over time now, Deputy, please.
How does that square with your pronouncements just now of all that you are going to do for the unemployed? Now, Tanaiste, I would advise you and the Labour Party, and maybe you should advise your minister, be very careful about where the Labour Party is going with this. There are certain billionaire-owned newspapers in this state who are just straining at the leash to resume the headlines that they left off in the late 80s about spongers on the dole, about the malingerers and all the rest of it. It is coming close to the surface. They wouldn't dare over the last 3 years because it was quite clear who was the culprit and who was the victim. Maybe they think that now that can be done.
Thank you, Deputy. I have to call
and do you want the Labour Party and your so-called Labour activation measures, which are really to blame the unemployed and harass them, rather than create real jobs?
Thank you.
You want to be responsible for that. Can I ask you?
Please don't. Deputy, please.
The end of this month, giving $3 billion, or the end of March, giving $3 billion for the Anglo promissory notes. Put that money into emergency programmes of job creation in public infrastructure, such as the remediation of septic tanks in rural areas, when we will put thousands of people to work. That's the cure for unemployment.
Margaret Tanaiste. Please, Tanaiste.
Well, of course, like all things, Deputy Higgins only sees half of the equation. He quotes redundancy figures, but of course he omits to talk about, for example, the record levels of job creation by the IDA since this government came into office. He forgets to talk about the fact that the levels of trade that the country has achieved in terms of our export, the highest trade surplus ever. What the government is setting out to do, and what we are doing, is to get people back to work by having jobs being created. Now, Deputy Higgins, that means that we have to attract investment into the country. That investment would certainly not be attracted into this country if we were to pursue the idiotic economic policies that you come in here and that you advocate that we pursue. We have to have our economic situation managed in a way that attracts investment into the country, that restores confidence to the domestic economy, and that grows jobs. And that is the strategy that the government is pursuing. Now, as you know, and as everybody knows, we have a huge level of unemployment in this country. It's far too high. 440,000 people on our live register. We want to get that down. Everybody, bar yourself perhaps, Deputy Higgins, realises that that can't be done simply by waving a manifesto at it. It has to be done over a period of time. And people who are out of work, people who have lost jobs, who are out of work, some of whom are out of work for a period of time, have real needs in the meantime. And those needs need to be addressed. And we are not going to leave people who are unemployed aside without their needs being addressed. And that is why we are taking the approach that we are taking, which is aimed at re-equipping them with new skills. People have different needs, may want to change career, may want to move on to something else. And we have a situation in the country where we have training and education bodies. There are budgets available for all of these areas. The Minister Burton's own budget in respect of labour activation measures will be increased from by about 100 million this year, so that we can deal more effectively and fairly and appropriately with the needs of people who are unemployed. So, lest there be any doubt about it, Deputy Higgins, unless you have any doubt about it, let's be clear about two things. First of all, government's priority is creation of jobs, growing our economy, getting people back to work. And secondly, dealing in a fair, reasonable, appropriate and supportive way with the people, Deputy Higgins, not statistics, people who are out of work and who want some hope for their own future in terms of getting back to work and being equipped to do that as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Tanaiste. That concludes Leaders'